name is Shyla. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a student in our Master of Social Work program here at UW. I'm also a student information specialist in our Office of Admissions. And I'm joined here today by Nyla
Hey,
Hernandez,
amores.
our Assistant Director of the MSW programs. And Nyla, you have your Master of Social Work here from UW and your JD.
Correct.
Awesome. And we're here today to talk about our administration and policy practice, or APP specialization.
Let's do it.
It's our macro social work specialization. It's one of three. We also have a specialization in clinical, which would be micro social work, and then community centered integrative practice, our meso social work. But today we'll talk about macro. Just to start us off, can you tell me a little bit about what macro social work is? I think it's one of the areas of social work that's less known about. What is macro social work, and what is our administration and policy practice specialization all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one thing that I want to expand on is there is this ecological system between the meso and the macro, and it's considered like the exo, right? Which could be organizations, institutions, etc. And so the reason why I say that is when we talk about CCIP, for example, it's really that liaison between like organizational practice and community localized practice and systems and governance, where and the direct clinical side that's associated to it. But APP in particular is really geared towards those high level administrative policy practice roles. And that is both within institutions, like community-based organizations, nonprofits, but also within local governance. So you might end up on like a city council, you might end up working for a city council person. And so what I really invite our APP students to think about, and our prospective APP students to think about when considering APP and what it is do you see yourself as someone who's creating like structural change, right? Is that something that motivates you? Is that something that inspires you? Not expires, excuse me. To do this work and to show up, like what are the concrete ways that we are making and affecting structural change? And so, yeah, I can pause there and see if there's other questions.
Yeah, no, thank you. We actually just had one of our alumni, Dion Foster, was elected to Seattle City Council this year. So that's a great, like, in real life example of what macro social work could look like. From what you're describing, so it could be organizational leadership, it could be local government. What kind of distinguishes APP from maybe public policy or poli-sci? Any of those others kind of really similar sounding degrees, but I know that APP is distinct. What would distinguish it from those others?
Yeah, so I think I want to compare it to like our clinical program, where I said that our clinical program is not like a intensive psych program. Our APP program is not an intensive like state or federal government systems program, right? You're going to get the foundations that you need. But what I really value about APP and our other specializations, and what distinguishes us as social workers versus somebody in public policy, for example, is that we are constantly thinking about how our systems interact with each other. I'm not ever just looking, like my role in the work that I'm doing exists in this area, right? But the way that I need to be thinking about this and how it impacts people's lives and the lived realities of folks I'm in community with, I need to be thinking a little bit more broadly. And so I would say that is what distinguishes us from a public policy program, for example. What I really enjoy about our APP program is we do a lot about program evaluation, community collaboration. So you're going to get concrete ways of evaluating programs as they exist, and as well as different ways that you can engage community on these like higher levels that we're thinking of, right? Like state and local governments. And so that's really something that I really enjoy about APP, is that it has you think about like broader systems, how they're shaped, what's impacting policy and like political landscapes, but it also still requires you to think about the direct implications that larger policy has on the ground. And that's something that's vital, because we are informing what the realities look like for people in our communities.
Thank you. And how would, because I love how you talked about one of the things that distinguishes us is we're even though we're at a policy level or a leadership level, we're still rooted in what our communities need kind of on the ground. How would you say are policy social workers, macro social workers able to do that? What are some ways that maybe what does it look like to bring communities or center communities in policy or leadership roles in social work?
There are so many different roles that you can take. I'm thinking there are lobbyists, there's legislative advocacy. So you could be like a legal advocate for a particular organization that's after a specific issue, right? I think a lot of the folks that I've come across and work with and have built community with are doing a lot of that, where it's like, what is the area that focuses me, whether it's immigration, whether it's reproductive health, gender-based violence, etc. What is like that one issue that is really, really motivating me, and how can I help shape policy around that issue? Is where I tend to see a lot of our social workers thriving. We've had social workers, as you said, Dion, right? We've had our social workers consider running for council. We've had our social workers go and work at, I think Dion even has worked at like philanthropic organizations, where it's like, I think about the structures that are needed to fund and sustain the programming that feeds community. And so I think there are so many different opportunities for us to engage on a macro level. That's not just, how do I write a bill, right? How do I get that passed? It's not intended to compare ourselves to like an attorney or a lawyer or a lawmaker, although we are those things as well. It just requires us to think more broadly, and how do we sustain long-term movement on a larger scale.
All right, so we talked a little bit about public policy and poli-sci and how those are different than APP and what makes APP distinct. I'm curious, how would you say, who do you think APP is a great fit for, and in what cases is APP not a great fit for someone?
Yeah, I think starting with like where APP might not be a great fit is like folks who are having like very concrete and rigid expectations about what to get from a program like that says APP, or excuse me, administrative a policy practice, right? And so anyone who's coming in and expecting to know everything about how like local government runs, and know everything about the ins and outs about how state bills are written and about how the federal government works, right? We don't, again, this is where we give breadth over depth, where it's like, we will expose you in different ways and show you different skills to engage with each of these different systems that you're interested in. But we are not going to be able to equip you to do each of those things on your own by yourself, right? And so I think it's really important that anyone coming out of our APP program kind of is able to manage that expectation of like, what can you get? With that said, if you are a person who is energized by program design, by system design, by management, by community strategy, and system evaluation, like this is the program for you. We are going to help build up those skills to be able to evaluate, design, and continue to build and improve upon different programs and management, while also telling you like, how does your political landscape shape, right, how these programs are impacted, or how they're designed and how they are ran. And so I would say that our APP program is really targeted towards folks who want to create systems change, but with a broad set of tools and a broad set of skills. If you have a particular and rigid idea of what that looks like and how it looks, that can inform your specialization practicum placement, but it might not be everything that you're getting out of our program.
I love that, and that it's kind of focusing on the strategy and evaluation, as you said, to be able to apply to a range of macro positions. Like we can't, in a program, teach you exactly every macro situation that you would ever be in, right? But
Exactly.
You're building that framework of how to assess it and approach it, regardless of what the policy issue is or the setting. Does that sound right?
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you so much, Nyla. I appreciated this conversation.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, besties.